and welcome to the CPD Group podcast. Join us as we guide you through all things CPD, interview some special guests, and offer advice to help your business thrive. We hope you enjoy listening. Sorry about that, just went for a little break. I had to get myself a cup of tea. Okay, but just been listening to a lot of what Alex has been talking about there. And, you know, we're constantly as a company trying to improve our own SEO and get our website as far up the ranking as we possibly can. So I thought at this stage, it'd probably be best to invite in, the lead from our marketing team, Jess, who's behind the camera over there. So we'll just bring Jess in for this bit, Alex, and then you'll be able to talk on a more technical level with her. Is that okay?
Amazing, yeah.
Lovely. Come on, Jess. Okay, so welcome, Jess.
Hello.
Thank you very much for joining us.
It's a bit weird being on this side of the camera.
I can imagine.
Behind the camera.
Yeah, welcome to my world.
Yeah.
Right, super. So, you know, you've met Alex off camera before
Yes.
already, so the floor is yours.
So I was just thinking, you've talked about AI before. How can companies use AI properly?
Yeah, it is a fantastic question and one that I spend a lot of time answering behind the scenes. So I'd always start with what Google's mission is. So again, Google's only job is to serve the most relevant and most engaging content that answer their users' specific search queries to them. So with that in mind, I'd be using AI for research. It's massively helpful for that. If you need anything up to date, then you're probably going to struggle with, I think, what is it? Gemini now is the latest version of Google's AI. That is much more up to date, but ChatGPT, I think, is back to 2021, is it? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're going to struggle to get anything up to date there, but basic research, ideas, structures, headings, things like that is really, really useful. But in terms of actually putting out that content that it comes up with, so for example, just going to ChatGPT and saying, write me an 800 word blog piece on the following title that's SEO optimized, you are going to get a rehash of everything else on the internet. Of course, AI, although we call it artificial intelligence, is not able to create anything new. It can only take what it's been fed and what it already knows and rehash that with different words in a different order. But of course, Google is much smarter than that. Maybe not as smart as they think they are, but they are on that path and they can understand, okay, well, this, although it might not be exactly duplicate, and of course, duplicate content serves no purpose to anyone, it's not helpful, so Google will devalue it. That AI written content is going to be devalued because it is essentially duplicate, saying the same as everyone else, just in a different order. Now, that's not to say that you can't use it for the odd paragraph here and there that you're stuck on. It's not to say that you can't build a structure or even write a piece for some inspiration and take elements of it, change it, edit it, make it more personalized. But of course, as ChatGPT and the other AI tools say themselves, the content isn't always accurate. Check it for accuracy. And beyond that, make sure it's personalized to yourself. You can train ChatGPT to write like you, and we've had lots of fun with that internally. Particularly for social content, it's really useful for that, training it on a particular persona, creating content along those lines. But in terms of actually taking raw AI content, putting on a website, I'd definitely avoid doing that. I think the more human input you can put into it, the more valuable it's going to be. To be on that though, with other digital marketing channels, there is nothing to say that you can't use it more. So for your social media channels, for email marketing, for even paid ad content to some extent, if you want to, can be super helpful for that because it's not bound by the same rules.
Because I think we use it, ourselves for that kind of thing, for the research element. But I think we were kind of saying before the podcast as well, you can kind of tell when something's been written by AI, which I think is like what you said. It's so important to keep that human element in there as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And kind of Google, it will pick up, it's kind of plagiarism almost, isn't it, as well, with that AI kind of rewriting of the content.
Yeah, it's walking a really fine line between plagiarism and unique content. But it comes back to this idea that it's unable at the moment. I'm sure that, who knows how quickly it's going to be around the corner. But at some point it will, I assume, be able to create completely new concepts, at which point, scary, I'll be very much redundant. I think the steps that we need to take in order to get there are going to get larger with each iteration. I think the minutest of steps forward are going to take monumentally longer, orders of magnitude longer to make those improvements. But yeah, I think it's going to all come. I think the value of human created work is going to become ever more important, particularly for Google. They don't want to just see the same rehash things over and over again. If they wanted that, they could create their own. One big change, though, that we, or at least Google, is playing with at the moment, it's only been rolled out in the US at time of recording, is generative search AI, generative search experience, GSE, which is Google's answer to ChatGPT. So I don't know if you've ever experimented yourselves with putting a search into ChatGPT, like give me, yeah. So it's Google's own play on this of their own generative answers. But I think a lot of people in our industry, in the SEO world, are terrified of this. It's going to eat up a lot of traffic. But in reality, even as it gets better at the moment, it's really slow. It takes about 14 seconds to get a result. It's not really always accurate, etc. But even as it does get better, it's still not going to take up the purchase intent searches. So for those that are looking for, I want to buy, I don't know, a new mug, for example, it's not going to be able to deal with that. Or at least if it does, and it does suggest companies, at that point it's still in the realms of Google search anyway. So it's not going to take away buying intent. Sure, if I say, give me some tips on styling my hair, sure, yeah, it might be able to do that. And that might take some search traffic away from those websites. But is that really valuable traffic anyway? And let's say you have a blogging website, that's a massive area within SEO, is websites that exist just to drive traffic for ad revenue from blogging topics. Yeah, they probably are going to get hit really hard, but commercial enterprises, businesses, that purchase intent searches are still very much going to be there.
Very interesting. So moving on, we kind of touched a little bit on this earlier about the black hat, white hat SEO. Can you go a little bit more into that and explain what that is?
I've heard about grey hat.
Grey hat, all the different kind of hats.
Yeah.
100%. I have to be careful with this one because people often get the wrong idea. So let's start with the basics. White hat is everything that Google says you should do in order to, get ranked on Google. It's all the good stuff and you're never going to be penalised for doing it. So what's that? Fresh, unique content, making sure all the technical stuff's done, that kind of bag. Black hat is what Google says that you shouldn't do. And these are the things that if you get caught doing it, you can get a manual action penalty. Like I said, they're kind of rare. We don't often see them. But these are things such as keyword stuffing. So back in the glory days of SEO, we're kind of talking early 2000s, there were lots of weird and wonderful tactics people used to get ranked. So for example, adding the keyword 1,000 times to their page, but having white text on a white background so nobody could see it.
I heard about that,
Yeah, and it worked. Those were really the glory days. People made a lot of money from that kind of thing. But thankfully, Google did get smarter, and those things now will get you penalised for doing it. Similarly with bad black hat link building practices. So again, link building is such a complex topic to go into. What gives the value of a link to of £2,000 versus one that you can buy for 2p? People often say, well, I can buy links cheaper, and it's, well, you can, but you get what you pay for. If you're spending £10 for 10,000 links, you're probably going to be a lot worse down than £10 by the time Google catches up with that. So that's black hat. And then, as you said, grey hat, very much between the lines. It's what Google doesn't explicitly say works and doesn't, but what does get results. And we walk a very fine line between white hat and grey hat in terms of, and this is what always gets me in trouble because people instantly put their guard up and like, what if I get penalised? As I said, I've never even seen a website penalised, let alone had one. But it's the things that Google has to rely on to build authority for websites that they can't and won't ever be able to fully control. So links have always been a massive factor in SEO, even though it's only recently that a lot of agencies have caught up. And Google are constantly trying to devalue them because they can be played. You can build artificial links, and I'd be surprised if you spoke to many SEOs that didn't do it behind the scenes. A lot will talk a good game about, we only do digital PR and we only do this, and maybe there are some that make that work, but that's when you need the tens of thousands of pounds budget to make that work. But a lot will buy and create artificial links, and Google, although they're trying to get away from that, can't ever break the cycle. They've been talking about devaluing links since the 2010s, and although they've brought in a lot of measures to stomp out some of the more poor form, let's say, link building, they're still tied to this idea of links, because ultimately, as AI expands and becomes more intelligent, everyone's going to have the same foundations. Everyone's going to have a perfectly optimized website that runs well and has optimized images and URLs. If you imagine that there's going to be a new, let's say, Yoast AI tool, everyone's going to be on the same even playing field from a content, from a technical perspective. So links is the only measure of authority that Google's going to have left to actually judge how authoritative something is. And of course, that could be gained through AI, but it's going to be a lot more difficult.
Very interesting. So moving on to metadata and writing your kind of title descriptions, that kind of thing. I find it hard myself to find a good balance between getting those SEO keywords in there and then making it engaging and having good call to actions, that kind of thing. What kind of advice would you give on that?
My first piece of advice was don't bite off more than you can chew in one sitting. I have a rule that we don't do more than 10 meta titles and descriptions at once, because you're going to lose your mind. Yeah. I mean, I read something not even that long ago that Google is actually, their official line is that keyword optimization for metas doesn't have any impact on search, but our own research says that isn't actually the case. It does have an impact. We've run some parallel tests alongside that. So I'll always say, write something that's engaging and going to get the click first, and optimize it second. So if you can get the keyword or keywords into the meta title, meta description, I would definitely recommend it. It's often much easier to do for the meta description than the title because it's longer. But avoid making it sound unnatural where you can. That would always be my recommendation, because ultimately the metas are there to get the click. So even if you rank first, if your meta is just some keyword optimized garbled mess, it's
human first, not
exactly right. Yeah, which is what Google will say as well. They will agree with that. And you can rank for everything in the world, but if nobody's coming to the site, then it doesn't really make any difference anyway. But where you can make it fit in a natural, optimized way, I definitely recommend doing it. But it is always easier said than done.
Yeah, it's very good advice. Thank you very much. So you mentioned earlier about local SEO strategies versus like market strategies. What's the kind of difference, and what kind of companies would use each, or is it a mixture of both?
It depends, yeah. Like all things in SEO. So
yeah,
exactly right. So I'd start off by asking a client or myself, if I was doing it for myself, where are our customers based, and do I have the resources to go national if I can go local? So, for example, I must admit, and guilty confession, we haven't touched our own SEO in 3 years. I think we're still about halfway down the first page. We were number one for 2.5 years. And it just didn't generate any leads. I'm convinced that all the search traffic for our local SEO keywords are just other SEOs checking out where they rank and trying to prove to each other who's the best. And it didn't generate anything, so we just didn't bother anymore. But it's asking, okay, well, there was, or at least Google was telling us, there was a market locally. So why compete nationally when we can compete locally? We knew if we want to compete for anything nationally, it's going to be a huge uphill battle. That we probably don't have the resources to be able to do. So if you can go local, if say you are a local business, let's say you're a trainer in a local area, you're probably going to be targeting a small demographic area. Whereas, I don't know, say a big e-commerce store, well, you're not bound by anything, maybe just the UK, but you could potentially go international. At that point, the local element probably isn't going to play a part. So it's just about having a common sense discussion with yourself or your team. Where do we target, and do we have the resources to go national? So like I mentioned earlier, there are some industries, say car insurance, for example. Unless you go super niche, you're never going to rank on Google first page for terms like car insurance unless you've got the next man with a mustache on a plane or a meerkat. It's not going to happen.
Very good. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about keywords. So are SEO keywords case sensitive?
It depends. In my experience, now this is a really interesting question. I've never been asked this before. In my experience, though, no, they're not.
No.
But one thing that is case sensitive are URLs, and actually, on certain CMSs, you can get yourself into a real mess with URLs with capital letters in. We recently had a client come on board with this. I'd never seen it before. I'd never even thought about it before until we found that there was this whole web and network of these duplicate pages with exactly the same URLs, but with capitals and non-capitals, which was, well, it wasn't me that did it, but very painstaking for someone on the team to have to go through and unpick. But in terms of keywords, I've never seen a difference based on my own tests. Whether there is something on the back end that Google are monitoring, maybe, but based on my own research and tests, no.
Okay. And with keywords, so is it always just one word, or can it be a phrase?
Yeah, it can absolutely. So there's the term that we use, or two industry terms we use, which is short tail and long tail. It can be short and long form, or the various different variations. But usually a short tail keyword is 1 or 2 words, and whereas a long tail will be a phrase or something that you're searching for, say asking a question, for example. I'd say that when it comes to keywords, though, rather than worrying about, typically a short tail keyword will be harder to compete for than a long tail, but not always the case. I'd always start with, rather than worrying about that, start with the intent behind it. Why is someone searching for this? Because typically a long tail keyword will have more purchasing intent. If I'm looking for where can I buy new mugs from versus just mugs, well, mugs could mean anything. I could be looking for anything at that point, whereas when I'm searching where to buy mugs from, okay, the search volume behind it and the competition might be way lower, but actually the people that arrive on my website have a clear intent of what they want to do.
And how many keywords should you aim to use or target?
it depends.
It's going to be a title of this podcast.
Yeah. It's something that we often come up against. So when we talk to companies and they're pitching with other agencies, they will often say things like, well, with this package, we get 50 keywords. And really, it doesn't mean anything because one, what are those keywords? Are they all slight variations of each other? Are they all keyword silos in their own right? What I mean by that is, for example, you might have mugs, you might have hats, you might have, jumpers. Those are all separate keyword silos. So if you've only got your 50 keywords under one of those silos, then it's not necessarily bringing any additional value. Really, the only metric that you want to measure is how expensive is the tool that you're using, your SEO tool that you're using to track keywords. So, for example, we use a tool called Agency Analytics. We also use Ahrefs. I've used SEMrush and Moz in the past. All of them have limits on the amount of keywords that you can track on those platforms, and that it costs more if you want to track more. That's the only limit, really, is time. If you are tracking tens of thousands of keywords that are all only slight variations of each other, if it's just you and you're the owner of the business and juggling lots of plates, then realistically, does it make commercial sense for you to be tracking that many? But in terms of how many you can go after as a business, we have some clients that have 10 keywords that we track. We have some that have 1,000, and it really just depends on the depth of how far we want to go down the rabbit hole and how much value can we deliver.
Yeah. And in terms of measuring the success of your SEO, obviously how far up the page you are, but what other ways can businesses measure the success of their SEO?
So the main metric that I would always want to track for a client is the end result. How much money are they making from SEO? Is it commercially viable? And although it's going to take some time for them to get there, and it's always going to take longer the longer you leave it because your competitors are getting stronger every day, the main measurement is really the return on investment. That's not to say, though, that there aren't companies out there that have other metrics that are important to them. It might be the vanity tracking. They might want to just rank higher for the sake of it and stick it to their competitors. Well, we can all respect that, right? But really, for us, the ultimate one is how much are you investing in SEO and what do you need to be making to make that money back and several times over. The main things that we always look at, though, on a campaign are the first thing that's always going to come is the keyword rankings. So what are your positions? So if you're starting from nowhere, then that's the natural progression and growth that we track is, okay, well, you were nowhere, you're now on page 10, you're now on page 7, 6, 5, 4. Great, we're on page 1. We're now starting to get traffic. SEO traffic is the next metric that we look at. Then from there, we tweak and modify the pages for conversion to make sure that they're actually commercially viable and they're generating revenue.
Brilliant stuff. That's all the questions I've got for today.
Excellent, Jess. Well, thank you very much for joining us. And Alex, thank you so much for joining us today. I mean, it's been extremely insightful. And if anybody out there does have any kind of SEO needs for your website, whether it's brand new or whether you are well established already but are looking for that extra boost, contact Novus Digital, and then I'm sure they'll be able to help you and put your strategy together to help you and make you boost in those rankings and kind of achieve the goals that you want to.
Thank you for having me.
Alex, brilliant. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Jess,
Thanks for having me.
thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the CPD Group podcast. Be sure to tune in next time for more helpful content. See you soon.
Before you go, did you know that you could receive a free CPD certificate from listening to this podcast? All you need to do is head over to the cpd.group/podcast. That's the cpd.group/podcast and enter the confirmation code 8000027.